Welcome, everybody. People are still rolling in, but we're going to get going. So we're so glad you joined us today to learn more about Project 2025, also known as the Presidential Transition Project, the one that Trump is flipping out over. I'm Susan Boley. I'm one of the founder leaders of the Bay Area Coalition. I'm co-hosting this event with Susan Morgan. She's the founder and director of Indivisible Marin. We're both from the San Francisco Bay Area, Marin County to be exact. And our Congress member is Jared Huffman. So we're very excited to be with him here and also to welcome Jamie Raskin all the way from Maryland's 8th District and with our professor Joyce Vance, who's going to keep us all honest. So at this point, I'm just going to go to the next slide, please, Leanne. So today's briefing is not just about being briefed, it's about taking action. And two of the groups here, the grassroots groups, have many ways for you to take action. And our websites are in chat right now. And take action with Indivisible Marin, the mission, what they do in election years and off election years is up there, and so is their website. Of course, they have phone banking, texting, and postcarding. And next slide, please. And the group that I lead is Bay Area Coalition from the San Francisco Bay Area, and we have virtual phone banks, one that is starting in 45 minutes, and Wednesdays and Saturdays, there's Zoom phone banks, and we do have many opportunities to canvass door to door in the critical House districts of CA 13 and 22. The House runs through California, plus Arizona and Nevada. And right there is a QR code you can just scan, and that will take you to our website, bayareacoalition.org. And again, that link is in chat. Next slide, please. I think that might be all the slides, right, Leanne? Okay, Leanne. Okay, so end slides. Great. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator tonight is Jared Huffman, our Representative Huffman and Representative Raskin and Joyce Vance. And we're going to bring them up into the room now on Spotlight. Hi, Representative Huffman. Take it away.
All right. Well, gosh, thank you, Susan and Susan Morgan and our local hosts, Indivisible Marin and Bay Area Coalition. This Zoom conversation is hosted locally, but we have RSVPs from all over California and all over the country, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So it's great to be with all of you. If you like conversations that are simultaneously terrifying and interesting and fun, you're in the right place. And if I had to be stranded on a desert island with two people to talk about Project 2025 with, I think I would pick these two who are with me here tonight. This is going to be great, and I'm super excited. I'll be moderating this dialogue with my two guests. I'll introduce them in a moment. And we're going to try to work in as many questions that we can from the audience. You know how to do that. But given that we have less than an hour, we're not going to be able to get to everyone. So just be advised that I will do my best. But we are going to stop right at 5 o'clock, and I'm going to hand it back to one of the Susans for a closing message to take us home. All right, so my incredible guests, they really don't need any elaborate introduction because these two are both rock stars and you know them very well. Joyce Vance is the sharpest legal scholar in America, former U.S. attorney, law professor at University of Alabama. She's all over MSNBC. And what I really appreciate about her is that she translates complex legal subject matter, constitutional issues, deep, wonky things into understandable English for everyone. And she does that better than just about anyone I know. Jamie Raskin is the ranking Democrat on the House Oversight and Government Affairs Committee. He is a serious legal scholar in his own right. He's one of my favorite colleagues and pals in the United States Congress. And he's famously known, of course, as the lead impeachment manager of the second impeachment of Donald Trump after the insurrection of January 6th. But I think the most important claim to fame for Jamie, in my heart, is that he's the co-founder of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus with yours truly. We did a lot of really important and good work together in that space. So Joyce and Jamie, thank you. I'm looking forward to talking about Project 2025 with the two of you, and let's dive right in. I thought we should start at the beginning, and so that usually involves a description of Project 2025, right? And I want to bring you into that. This is a 920-page detailed presidential transition plan written by dozens of Trump insiders, published by Heritage and 110 other very conservative groups, including more than a few that are listed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups. Heritage has published a policy proposal for Republican candidates for president going all the way back to 1980, but we have never seen anything this comprehensive, this specific, or this extreme. And so I characterize it as a takeover plan for Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans to very quickly dismantle checks and balances, to amass unprecedented presidential power, and to take total control over our government and our individual freedoms. Let me ask you if I've missed anything in that sort of top line description, or if there's anything you want to add so we all begin with a common understanding of what Project 2025 is. Joyce, you want to go first?
I think that's a great description. You know, for anyone who hasn't seen it before, it's worth looking at the table of contents, because what you see is a listing of chapters, and they're all about different executive branch agencies or other entities with very specific detailed plans for each of those entities. And as a former federal government employee, I might think it's a great idea to coordinate and combine DHS and some of the other agencies with responsibility for immigration to be more efficient and streamlined. And that's one of my concerns about Project 2025. Some of it is just cloaked in this very simple policy language, but when you really read it deeply, I think it's precisely what Congressman Huffman says. It is a plan for consolidating power in the executive branch, for really taxing middle-class Americans, just regular folks, to support the work of billionaires, and taking our rights off of the table. Those are the three big buckets of activity I see going on in this rather commonplace language.
Yeah. Jamie.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for pulling it together, Jared, and I'm delighted to be with all those Jared Huffman people out there and with you, Joyce. Well, I mean, the way I think of it is that a critical part of it is just culture war. That these are people who think if they're in office, it means they've won the culture war, and now MAGA is going to control your life, your bedroom, your healthcare, your religious destiny, and everything that they want, they're going to get there. Two, I view it as regime change. They want to permanently change the character of American government. And so they want to sack 50,000 federal government workers in the professional civil service and replace them with Trump sycophants and flunkies, so it can just be Trump ideological crusade all the way down in every federal department and agency. They think they're going to overturn a case called Humphrey versus Humphrey's executor, which will allow them to just sack members of federal agencies and federal boards and replace them again with their acolytes. And so that's really, moving to a different kind of government. They're going to use the essentially unlawful device of impoundment to take money that we've appropriated for purpose X and then use it for purpose Y. We saw Trump do that when he redirected money in DOD to the building of the wall in Mexico, saying, well, that's real defense. And even though Congress didn't appropriate, we're going to do that. But the third thing that I think it is, and this is kind of dark, so forgive me, but it's a kind of civilizational death wish, because they promise to reverse all the progress that we've made on climate change, reverse all of the rules and regulations adopted in the Biden-Harris administration, and then even to purge use of the words climate change in the federal government. So the way they're going to deal with it is they're just going to send it down at the Orwellian memory hole.
Yeah. I want to come back to your reference to impoundment, because I think that's one of the technical terms that everyone needs to really understand. It's a really important part of Project 2025, and I want the two of you to speak to it. But before we do that, Jamie, is there one part of this 920-page manifesto that scares you the most?
Well, I mean, I represent NIH and NOAA and FDA and a lot of federal regulatory agencies. I've got 50 or 60,000 federal workers in my district, although I don't want anybody to have the impression that most federal workers live in the Washington area. They don't. More than 2/3 of federal workers are all over the place, including a lot in California, of course. But I pay close attention to this, and they really do want to destroy the civil service with the creation of this Schedule F, which basically means repoliticizing a whole bunch of jobs that were professional civil service jobs. And there are tons of very qualified people who've gotten into it because they're scientists or they're environmental engineers or they're transportation specialists. These people are all going to be gone. Remember when Trump was in office and there was a hurricane coming and it was going to hit southern Florida, and Trump took out a Sharpie and said, "Oh no, it's going to Alabama." And it caused just massive confusion and chaos. And then he wanted to sack the scientists who contradicted him afterwards to try to reassure people in Alabama, but also to warn people in Florida, no, it's not true that the hurricane has changed course. And of course, that's where it hit. Well, we lived through that with COVID-19. I mean, his own COVID advisor, Deborah Burke, says in her book that we lost hundreds of thousands of people because of his just whimsical and paranoid and deranged approach to life and to public policy. And we can't afford that. In general, we can't have this unitary executive absolutism, but we certainly can't afford it with somebody like Donald Trump, who's just a madman.
Joyce, we have seen extreme Republican ideas from Heritage and others for a long time. What is different about this, and is there a part of it that alarms you the most?
Can I only pick one?
You pick two or three.
I mean, it's dark. I mean, this is not fun stuff. It's not good bedtime reading. It's important to read it all. Look, what concerns me big picture is how aligned this work product from the Heritage Foundation is with what we hear Donald Trump say on the stump. I want to deport people beginning on day one. I want to take away birthright citizenship. His cavalier attitude towards law enforcement. And, there's a lot of talk about politicizing DOJ and government and who's responsible for that. Well, if you read Project 2025, it's a roadmap for putting the Justice Department under the thumb of the White House. And I guess there are a lot of horribles in here. I'll pull that out as one horrible, because imagine Donald Trump capable of using the power of prosecutors in the 94 U.S. attorneys' offices across the country to punish his perceived enemies and reward his friends, right? I mean, that would mean everything from directing the Justice Department to do civil cases that would help his buddies out, and directing them to indict people that he didn't like. Realistically, everyone who in the last 4 years, 8 years has gotten under his skin could be the target for, take your pick, some sort of crazy prosecution. I'm a big believer in the justice system. I mean, I think that juries get these things right, judges get these things right on appeal, but it's not for nothing to take somebody and drag them into court. Prosecutors have a pretty good knack of getting grand juries to indict cases that they want indicted. And so you can force someone to defend themselves because they've become your political enemy. If that doesn't scare you and make you think about fascist countries, then you should go and read the chapter on the Justice Department for yourself. It is some pretty stark stuff there.
And Joyce, let's talk a little more about the evil genius behind Project 2025, because some of this stuff does seem technical and wonky, reorganizing and consolidating these departments, changing lines of accountability for agencies, even Schedule F civil service reform. But it seems to me that these folks really went to work after the first Trump administration in identifying all of the ways in which Trump's worst authoritarian impulses were held in check, including individuals like Mike Pence right up to the end on January 6th, and institutions and norms and laws. I'm told that they even began by going to Hungary to literally study Viktor Orban and how he had advanced all this authoritarian power. Do you see this evil genius at work when you read through Project 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I do. You know, the Heritage Foundation, everybody knows who they are. They're very conservative. They've written plans like this for presidents before. And so the question, I think a legitimate one is this business as usual or something different? To me, it looks like something different. I teach a seminar in law school on democratic institutions, and every year we start out by talking about, well, who are the institutions? What makes up the institutions? And by the last class, my students have always concluded every single year that I've taught this, I think that's 8 years now, that the institutions are the people who populate them. So whether that's Representative Raskin's workforce, you know, these career federal employees who Trump intends to send home, at least 50,000 of them, losing that expertise in order to pick up loyalists, whether they're qualified or not. That's a scary sort of thing. Here's something interesting about what the Heritage Foundation did on their Project 2025 website. They put up a page and it said, do you want to be a part of the next conservative administration? And there's a button and you can punch that button and you can fill out forms and ask to be vetted for an appropriate job. And, you know, I wonder, we saw this very interesting debacle yesterday where Trump said that, you know, I don't know anything about Project 2025. That struck me as a little bit disingenuous, since he apparently had the power to get the guy who was running Project 2025 to resign immediately, right? Looks like there's a little connection here. I mean,
Well, he said he didn't know anything about it, but he disagreed with some parts of it.
That's
that
hard to
was the
do.
first
That's really
statement. It
hard
was
to know
really
nothing
great.
while disagreeing.
It was really great. And look, I mean, it was lies, right? I think sometimes we have to be willing to, and it's uncomfortable to say people are lying. Well, Donald Trump is lying when he says he doesn't know what's in Project 25, but he rejects it. And he wants to see the guy who's running it leave. But the fact that they were vetting people, that they were putting people together to replace these missing 50,000 into the institutions, and we know that it's those people, they are in fact the institutions, right? So the Justice Department is the career prosecutors who commit to follow the Constitution and set aside their personal affiliations to do their job. Without that, we are no longer a democracy. And I think that speaks to the notion that there's evil genius behind this.
Yeah, and Project 2025 talks a lot about how they're going to go about descheduling these employees, making them at will, and then, you know, purging them, more than 50,000. They're going to find anyone that's ever shown any support for a Democratic politician. They're going to find anyone who's ever been part of a DEI program. They're going to find anyone that's been involved in climate science, and those folks are going to be gone. But, you know, the other very creepy part of this aspect of Project 2025 are these training academies and this database that they're building, maybe as many as 20,000 vetted Trump loyalists that'll repopulate the government after the purge. It was interesting yesterday when they did this choreographed resignation of Paul Dans that Trump, you know, was clearly involved in. Heritage started changing its tune, and they started saying that this was going to be done to provide personnel support for government at all levels. This is something they weren't saying before. If you go to their website before they change it, it's all about this, all of these academies and this database being for the presidential personnel. And now they've done a little sleight of hand, and they're trying to say that it's for all levels. Jamie, how do you feel about your new federal workforce being, you know, coming from these training academies and database?
I mean, I think that they recognize what happened when Trump came in after 2016. They really didn't have very many people on their side, and I know so many people who were said, "Wait, you're not leaving, are you?" Like they just needed people in jobs. Well, they want to make sure that doesn't happen now. But remember, and this is like a message that I've been taking around the country, and I just feel stronger and stronger about it every day, Jared. Like we are the vast majority in America. Remember, Joe Biden beat Trump by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. We are adding 12 to 13 million new young voters who are pro-choice, pro-science, pro-environment, pro-future. They're not interested in authoritarianism and extremism and fascism and Donald Trump's speculations about whether Kamala Harris is really Black or Asian. I mean, an entire generation rejects everything that they stand for, So they, electorally, they depend on voter suppression, gerrymandering, and then ultimately political coup and insurrection, because they can't beat us. And it's only going to be worse this time. And they're going to be trying all kinds of stuff in the states. But in terms of governance, they don't have enough people, and so they are actually out there looking for people to join their imaginary non-existent administration. That's not going to happen. And, this is going to be a dogfight to the very end. But I want everybody out there to have the sense that we are the vast majority in the country. We're obviously the vast majority in California. And if the Senate were constituted the way the House is on a one person, one vote principle, you guys would have not 2 U.S. senators, you'd have 40 U.S. senators. There are 20 states whose combined population is less than that of California. They have 40 senators, and you guys have 2. So I'm glad you're organizing to compensate for that structural dilution of California's, proper equal representation in America. And in a social and scientific and cultural sense, California is so often the cutting edge of America. So we need you guys engaged. And Jared, thank you for organizing people and not just being complacent about having a beautiful blue district.
Well, thank you for that pitch for California. I appreciate it. Joyce, I want to ask you about the part of Project 2025 that they won't show us. On the Heritage website, they boast that Project 2025 is, in their words, an open book. You can look it up on the web and you can see it yourself. They've published it, except that Project 2025 is 4 pillars, and they've only published 3 of the 4 pillars. The 4th pillar is still secret. And of course, it's the most important part because it is their 180-day action plan. These are the executive orders and the presidential decrees and the emergency proclamations that are going to roll out on day 1, probably within the first hours of a second Trump presidency. And, I think we would be right to assume it could include things like the Insurrection Act and other emergency authorities. It could even include declarations of martial law and military deployments domestically. Pretty extreme stuff. The only thing they've said about it is just conspicuously missing from what they've published. But the only thing they've said about it is an interview. The head of Heritage said, well, this is just too controversial and sensitive to publish. So what do you think they're hiding, Joyce?
Yeah, so, I participated in the roundtables that the Brennan Center ran, trying to answer this precise question and to think about what do you have to do? Because Project 2025 involves the first 180 days of the next conservative presidency. And what do you have to do to get rocking and rolling, right? The one thing that we fail to understand as Democrats, I think it's beginning to dawn upon us, but it's really important. These are not people who will feel constrained to play by the rules. So if Donald Trump wants to shut down the Women's March that takes place the day after the inauguration by invoking the Insurrection Act, whether or not he's entitled to do that, he will absolutely do that. Whether the Impoundment Act permits him to use funds in a certain way, he will absolutely do that. Things like violating the Posse Comitatus Act and bringing in perhaps military folks in a domestic capacity. These things are only prohibited for people who follow the law. And so that is my fear, is that we are not prepared for what we would see if this were to happen. There are a lot of possible horribles out there, rounding up people who are folks who don't have legal status to be in this country and ejecting them, separating families on a scale that makes the first Trump administration look like it wasn't bad, denying birthright citizenship and forcing those people to leave. All of these things happen in a world where there is a lot of international, I'm not a foreign policy person, but obviously we're in the middle of multiple war zones that are escalating. And that's maybe what the worst part of Project 2025 is. It's hard to express that it's not any one individual part. It's all of those parts coming together in that first 180 days with an international dynamic in play that's not an easy time for the United States and the world. all of that together is what they don't want us to know about, just how quickly they can begin, right? A lot of this stuff is day one. You hear Trump say it all the time. I'm going to do this on day one of my presidency. Somebody has put that language into his ears. And then just the scope and breadth of what he can do to change our way of life. And maybe he won't want to do that. Maybe it'll be the kinder, gentler Trump that they keep telling us we're going to see. The problem is, what if it's not? What can he do, particularly with this document as guidelines? And there are not a lot of boundaries out there.
Yeah, let me take you to an even darker place there on this same thread. It seems to me Project 2025 is inviting all sorts of legal challenges and constitutional crises, whether it is challenging the constitutionality of the Impoundment Act or interpreting these old morality codes from the Comstock Act in this really expansive way and trying to weaponize it to control abortion and contraception and IVF, even in blue states. So many of these things will find their way into the courts. They obviously feel pretty comfortable about their chances with the Supreme Court. And one of the most chilling things I've heard is J.D. Vance, who is, one of the biggest fanboys of Project 2025 out there, actually saying that he thinks that Donald Trump in a second presidency should go full Andrew Jackson and just challenge the Supreme Court to enforce its own orders. That's really dark. Tell us about, where that takes us as a constitutional democracy. The two of you.
Well, of course, Donald Trump is not going to need to challenge any of the orders of the Supreme Court because they control the Supreme Court. The Roberts Court now reads language out of the Constitution if it's inconvenient for Donald Trump, like no one who swears an oath to uphold the Constitution who violates it by engaging in insurrection or rebellion shall ever be allowed to hold federal or state office again, which is as clear a command as you can find in the Constitution in Section 340. I mean, that's just read out. So that's just gone. And then there's language which does not appear in the Constitution, which should appear if you want to turn it into a constitutional command, like the president may not be prosecuted for crimes committed in office if they're within his core functions, or presumptively may not be prosecuted for any other crime unless we tell you it's okay. Bring it back to us and we'll let you know. I mean, when the framers of the Constitution wanted to give people immunity like us under the speech and debate clause, they did it explicitly. So now the Roberts Court, this neo-monarchical gang of Federalist Society hacks, gets together and says, let's just invent a doctrine. The Stork brought it. The president can't be prosecuted, even though it cuts against all these different parts of the Constitution. So, look, Russell Vogt, who is, the mastermind behind Project 2025 and was Trump's budget guy, he uses the language of post-constitutional. He says, we're in a post-constitutional America, or at least the left thinks it is, but then, he projects it onto us, and then he talks about us being a post-constitutional government. What does that mean? I mean, that is what fascism is. It is the idea that you just set the rule of law and the Constitution aside, and it's just a play of power. And of course, Donald Trump has said that numerous times, that you've got to get rid of the Constitution and the rules that are getting in the way of his making America great again. So, this is why I loved everything Joyce just said, except you used one word I disagreed with when you said a conservative presidency. There's nothing remotely conservative about it. And we've got to stop describing them as conservatives, right? Like, we are the liberals because we believe in liberty, and we're the progressives because we believe in progress, but we're also the conservatives because we believe in conserving the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the water and the land and the climate system. These are nihilistic, authoritarian, fanatic extremists. And really, it dignifies them in a way that they don't deserve by calling them conservatives. Liz Cheney's a conservative.
Yeah.
Can I just agree with that for a second? Because I've been thinking about that same thing so much. I mean, it is painful as a former appellate lawyer to say that you no longer have respect for the Supreme Court, but this court has really burned that. And I think calling them conservative is sort of a shame to conservatives. And in many ways, I've started to think about this as an authoritarian court, or a court that's, a wing of the cult of personality. We need to, I think, settle upon language that best describes that and begin to use it systematically, because the Supreme Court really is on the ballot, in the sense that if we want to restore that institution's integrity, the only way to do that is with reform, is with new appointments, with people who will follow their oaths. It is really an alarming development in our society. And we're all laughing as we talk about this, because if we weren't laughing, we'd be crying. It is a really, really bad situation.
I mean, I call them a neo-monarchical court.
I
They
can't
really-
pronounce words with that many syllables. You're going to have to do a
Well,
short.
it's hyphenated. You get the neo in there, but they're
Neo-monarchical.
laying out a red carpet for what they thought before President Biden made his heroic decision, what they thought was going to be Trump's return to power and the restoration of the president king. I mean, that's really their vision of government.
Neo-monarchical. Okay, I'll try that.
Right.
Give it a try. Yeah, just practice it a couple times.
All right, I've got several questions coming in about what all of this means when it comes time to count the votes in the next presidential election. So do we have reason to worry if Project 2025 were implemented under a second Trump administration that there may not be a peaceful transfer of power?
I'm sorry, is the hypothetical that we win, which is the
No.
hypothetical, that we don't win?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can worry about that with Mike Johnson and some other things, but we have an Electoral Count Act in place now that is a little better, and we have Kamala Harris playing the role of vice president this time around. I think the concern is if Trump were to win and Project 2025 were to roll out, what does that mean for the next transfer of power?
Oh, I got you. Well, let me just say one word as a footnote to what Joyce was saying before, because I very much agreed with her that their first instinct in 2016 was to go to immigration and, build the wall and the Muslim ban. And I think they would do the same thing. They view that as the most unifying issue they've got. And they're not going to start with abortion and The Handmaid's Tale. They'll get to that, but they're going to start with setting up detention camps and rounding people up to they think unify people in a racist and xenophobic way to try to kick people out of the country, and then also to intimidate everybody else. It will be like the Alien and Sedition Acts at the beginning of the country, that they will be able to use that against their enemies and then tease out people who will be their political opponents. And they ran. There's a wanted meme that's in right-wing circles with the members of the January 6th committee. I called Liz Cheney. I was giving her a hard time because they put my face first, even before hers. I couldn't believe that. But and there are literal hit lists. You know about this one, Jared. This guy who's a former military official who has a list. You're on it.
Secretary of Retribution, he calls himself.
The Secretary of Retribution. So this is real life stuff. I mean, I got to tell you, people in my family and the families of a lot of people who are getting the death threats and are seeing this stuff are really, have been thinking about Plan B. Now, I got to tell you, there's such a surge of energy and optimism and commitment on our side right now that I think that's subsided somewhat. But that's very much out there. People are afraid. And, in terms of the next election, Donald Trump said it yesterday, right? He just said, or a couple of days ago, he said, my Christians, my beautiful Christians, I love you. Just get everybody out to vote just one last time. One last time. And then, it's like he's getting everybody for the rapture, everybody's going to go live in a millenarian Christian white nationalist regime with him, and everybody else will be consigned to tribulation and prison.
Jamie's going full Margaret Atwood now. I want to ask Joyce if you agree that it probably starts with detention camps and mass deportations for the reasons Jamie eloquently explains.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a common enemy, right? That's how authoritarians work. And so it's the other, the scary person for whatever reason, whether you're scared they're going to take your jobs or be smarter than your kids in school, or they're just different. In some ways, I think about this phenomenon that in Alabama we call the Alabamization of America, because it seemed like before Donald Trump was elected, we saw a lot of this stuff happening in real time, and it was not very surprising to us to see it happen after Trump was elected. You know, maybe that was because we in Alabama contributed our former Senator Jeff Sessions to the Justice Department. And so seeing this sort of attitude about immigrants didn't surprise us. But I just want to share one story to underscore your point. I was the U.S. Attorney in North Alabama during the Obama administration. The Alabama legislature passed an anti-immigration measure that they billed as a deport yourself measure. I made myself sort of unpopular in the Justice Department by insisting that we challenge that law. It was absolutely heinous. We did end up challenging, we did win it. But one of the horrible provisions in it that other laws, like the Arizona law that happened around the same time, something that they didn't happen, was this provision. It was a provision that required American citizen kids to say what their parents' citizenship status was before they could register to go to school. In other words, even if you're an American citizen, you can't go to school if your parents aren't here legally without outing them and having us come pick up your parents and deport them. There were folks in Alabama, the future Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, who loved it. Sessions did a radio interview where he was asked about it. You know, isn't it horrible to keep kids out of school? And he said, well, their parents should have thought about that. I mean, you know, I hate it for the kids, but so what? This hatred of immigrants is so unifying in some corners of our country, and Trump will make it even more so. And it is something that we have all got to push back against. I mean, other than, you know, the old saying that we are all immigrants, which is, of course, mostly true in this country, this idea of unifying the country around hate is so stunningly un-American.
Yeah. Just to close the loop on the questions about would there be a peaceful transfer of power if Trump makes it in, we probably all agree that with J.D. Vance as the vice president, with all of these other checks on presidential power gone, with absolute immunity from the Supreme Court, President Trump is unlikely to voluntarily leave office. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly Liz Cheney has said this will be the last election we have. A lot of Republicans who know him best, Michael Cohen, they all say the same thing. I mean, I don't even think there'll be a peaceful transition for a presidential nomination at the Republican convention because there's going to be such a fight between J.D. Vance and Donald Trump Jr. The way it was explained to me by one Republican was that Donald Trump Jr. got behind J.D. Vance for VP here on the agreement that Vance would name Donald Trump Jr. the number 2 the next time around to, you know, keep the Trump succession going. But now J.D. Vance is such a nightmare and such an albatross around the neck of the Republican Party that Donald Trump Jr. probably thinks it'll just go monarchical style directly to him from Donald Trump. So he'll take over the emoluments business from his dad directly.
You know, we've already talked about the language Trump used this week at the Christian convention he spoke in, but I mean, that language is utterly chilling. You will never have to vote again because I will have fixed everything.
Yeah. So, Jamie, you are one of the original members of the Stop Project 2025 task force that I got started a couple months ago. Joyce Vance has been great to work with on that as well. You know, 2 months ago, when we were just talking about getting this started, no one had heard of Project 2025. We saw some polling that was like 12% of the people had even heard about it. Hardly anyone understood it. A couple of weeks ago, it passed Taylor Swift as the most talked about thing on the internet. And all of a sudden,
That makes Jared Huffman the most influential public figure in America because you created our Stop Project 2025 project.
That's called correlation, not causation. But there definitely has been a change in this 2-month period, in part because Joyce and other people in the media have been out there talking about it. I think we've done our part to push this into the national conversation. Why has it changed so dramatically to the point that even Donald Trump and Republicans at Heritage are trying to memory hole this thing and pretend it doesn't exist.
Well, why are they? Oh, well, look, Nancy Mace, actually, let's say an unnamed member of the U.S. House of Representatives came up
Not
to me.
Nancy Mace, or maybe Nancy Mace.
Not anybody but Nancy Mace. It was not Nancy who came up to me when we were railing in the Oversight Committee about Project 2025, and she said, "I told them not to publish all that stuff," and like the Republicans are running away from it, not because they disagree with it, but because they know how unpopular it is. But it was a sign of major hubris on the part of the pre-Kamala Harris Republicans. They really thought that the Democrats were going down. They really thought Trump was going to be president. And they were like, yeah, why not publish all of this insane stuff that 90% of Americans reject, And so at this point, they're a hoist on their own petard. They can't run away from it. And, we're stopping Project 2025 with Project 2024. And the Democrats are on fire right now, and the independents and the moderate Republicans. And we've got just the right amount of time. I remember Leonard Bernstein said that you only need two things for a successful completion of a task. One is a plan, and the other is not quite enough time. And so we have not quite enough time, but everybody's going crazy getting out there and making this 100 days count.
Yeah, there's something about the audacity of them putting all of this in writing. The great line from the movie Patton when he finally defeated Rommel in a tank battle. He said, "You magnificent bastard, I read your book."
Right.
But Joyce, why do you think that this has caught fire and just really gained so much traction within the last 2 months?
Yeah, so, I think it's repetition, frankly. I think it's sort of like this national game of telephone where a couple of people started messaging about it and then more people picked it up. And I think what this says is that this is so outrageous that it's not the kind of thing people hear about and forget. It's the kind of thing that they hear about and get really upset about. And you find out, oh, part of Project 2025 is eliminating the Department of Education and Head Start and programs for kids, right? Or eliminating the NOAA early warning system. It's all these little pieces of it that are reprehensible. Trump, by the way, has something on his website that he calls Agenda 47. I think I've got that right. And it really is sort of in Donald Trump language, it's the crayon version of Project 2025. But there's a lot of carry.
The Sharpie version.
The Sharpie version.
Yeah.
And you hear him speaking at these rallies, and he's not shy about it, right? It's like you hear him say it, you read that it's in Project 2025. Increasingly, people in the media have begun to talk about it. I have now had the experience of being in the grocery store and having the person who was checking me out say, "Have you heard about Project 2025? And I said, no, I haven't. What have you heard about it?"
Oh.
And she said, it's absolutely terrible. And she everybody has their list of horribles. And I think that's the point. There's something for everyone to hate in this. If you're a mom like me, it's getting rid of education and special education, or gutting the Justice Department's integrity. There is something for everyone to hate in this.
Jared, we would have gone through this in 2016 if they had known more about the government and how it actually operates. But they purged so many of the establishment Republicans who actually knew about government. They got rid of them. And I think it was 2 or 3 years before Donald Trump was walking around saying, "And I've got my Article 2, and my Article 2 allows me to do whatever I want," But now they're going in with very explicit authoritarian plans. And not only are they going in with that conscious strategy, but they're going to be able to say the whole country understood what we were running on. We were running on a post-constitutional America.
Trump also had a few institutionalists around him because he kind of had to when he was first finding his way. But this time around, it's going to be like Mike Flynn and people like that, and J.D. Vance, people that will do anything Trump.
Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and establishment Republicans are bigger enemies to them than Jared Huffman is, because they're traitors to the cause and they must be purged. It's all about abolishing the rhinos. It's nothing remotely like Abraham Lincoln's party. That was anti-slavery, pro-freedom, pro-union, anti-know-nothing, anti-conspiracy theory, rationalist, scientific party with a positive agenda for government. And this is just a really scary authoritarian cult of personality, everything that Jared and Huffman and I stand against in the Free Thought Caucus.
All right, the two of you. Yesterday was a big day for Donald Trump and Heritage to try to shut down this whole conversation. And they kind of choreographed this resignation of Paul Dans, who was Donald Trump's personnel czar in his first administration, one of the chief architects of Project 2025. And they're attempting to say it's over. This thing, we never knew anything about it. And now they're shutting down the whole thing. And they're even threatening to punish the folks at Heritage if they keep whipping up energy about Project 2025. Is this over? Are we done? Do we have to move on to something else?
No. I mean, to your point, right? They are going to say they ran on this post-constitutional plan. Donald Trump will have no trouble saying, oh, well, I read it after I said that and I decided it was all good, so we're adopting it, or whatever his story is going to be. You know, maybe they'll have a new name, maybe they'll have a new formation for it. But this is the plan, because we hear Trump say it over and over when he speaks in public. There is no doubt.
And there's an awful lot of receipts here that show how tangled Donald Trump and his inner circle are with this document and everything it represents. It's just pretty hard to revise that out of existence. Jamie, do you think this remains part of Democrats' closing argument?
Oh yeah, I mean, remember, like 99 or what? How many days we have left? 98 days. You know, that's the wink of an eye in a presidential campaign. So right now, it is the anti-MAGA coalition that's been revived by Kamala Harris, plus this surge of young people all over the country against Project 2025. You know, plus we've got the cat ladies on our side too.
That's true. The single cat ladies.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a lot of questions about, and I get this, you know, sometimes when I talk about Project 2025, people are afraid and they tell me that it's my job. I'm a congressman. Do something about it. Stop it. So, you know, lots of questions about what can Congress or President Biden do to just stop this and make it go away. It's not that simple. Right. And so talk, if you would, Joyce, about the limited toolbox that we have right now to preemptively stop Project 2025. And then, you know, the punchline here is that we're going to have to win the election, but we'll come back to that.
I mean, we do have a very limited toolbox. I think evil genius, to use that term again, part of this is that a lot of it is stuff that a president who is willing to throw out the Constitution can do. And look, I often say, and I think that it's true here too, that the people who have held Trump accountable, really the only institution that has succeeded in holding him accountable, is the voters. And it will be up to voters again. And so as someone who does a lot of work with voting rights, I will just say, on the 89th day before the election, you should go out and check your voter registration status and document it, because closer than 90 days to the election, your status can't be changed. And that means if you're in one of the states like mine, where the Secretary of State tries to prune the voter rolls, if you're an active voter on that 89th day, they can't move you to inactive status, force you to vote a provisional ballot, and jump through a lot of hoops to make sure your ballot gets counted. Voting matters. There's a lot of stuff we all have to do, but that easy thing is on the 89th day, check your status, take a screenshot, and after that, they can't move you off the rolls.
And on this limited toolbox, yeah, President Biden could do an executive order to try to preempt Schedule F civil service reform, for example. He could do a rulemaking. All of that is pretty easily undoable by the next administration, right? So, you know, we can't pass legislative firewalls in this Congress because of the filibuster and the Republican majority in the House. We're sort of stuck with winning the darn election. And if we don't win the election, we're stuck with turning to lawyers like you, Joyce, and throwing some Hail Marys in the courts, right?
I think that's right. And look, I mean, lawyers sort of became folk heroes in this country during the Muslim ban when my former colleague Jenny Durkin in Seattle went to the airport there and sort of physically kept planes from leaving. I mean, there were lawyers who did some pretty amazing things. Representative Raskin is a first-rate constitutional scholar in the guise of a congressman. I mean, people like that will come up with brilliant strategies, and we will go to the courts and we will win in the district courts. And as long as we're not in the Fifth Circuit, we may win in the courts of appeals. And the big question is, what's the Supreme Court going to do? And was this immunity opinion we saw, was that in some ways a product of the zeitgeist where folks had decided that Joe Biden was going to lose and Donald Trump was going to win? And might that change if Kamala Harris wins? And might this court right itself? This anti-monarchical, wait, I've lost the name. Is it monarchical?
You may
Neo.
drop the second syllable, but yeah, no, you got it. Anti-monarchical.
Monarchical, whatever they are. These guys who were willing to support an authoritarian president with their rulings and ignore decades of established precedent, I'm not confident that we will win in the cases that will matter the most in front of them. So vote.
All right, Jamie. So we do have bills that we have introduced to codify the right to choose and LGBTQ equality and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and all sorts of other things that would be legal firewalls to an agenda like Project 2025, but we can't pass them in this Congress. Why do all roads seem to lead back to the election, and what is at stake here?
Well, first they lead to the election and then they lead back to the Roberts Court, the monarchical court, because let's assume that we do our job right and we're doing our job right. And I think we're going all the way and we win the House and we hold the Senate and Kamala Harris becomes the 47th president. Okay. And then we start to pass everything we're talking about. For example, codifying Roe versus Wade, which the vast majority of Americans want, right? The Roberts Court can say, what gives you the authority to do that? We don't think Congress has the power under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment to guarantee women's right to choose. You don't enforce a right by enlarging a right, as the court said in the Violence Against Women Act case, U.S. versus Morrison, or as they said in Shelby County versus Holder, clipping our wings on the Voting Rights Act, right? So this is a court that is just finger painting all over the Constitution and acting as an arm of Donald Trump's RNC. So I think we got to view the election as something we've got to win and hold by all lawful means necessary and possible. And that's just the beginning of the fight. Because
we're still going to need Supreme Court reform and other things.
We need to keep moving forward because they're not going to take no for an answer in terms of their mega agenda. I mean, just remember Sam and Martha Ann Alito and their unflagging devotion to the MAGA cause, okay?
Oh, I smile not because it's not very dark, but Jamie just can turn a phrase like no one else. Hey, Jamie, one final minute from you, and we're gonna close it out.
We're doing the right thing. I mean, I missed that Brennan Center thing that Joyce was talking about. I wish I'd been able to go to that. They were kind of game planning different things, and it's important, and we're trying to sketch it all out and figure it out. But the bottom line is, you really can't predict the future. And the best thing we can do is what you're doing tonight, which is organizing the people. So we're in constant touch with people and people are ready and vigilant. And by the way, you know what enjoys a common cognate root with vigilant is the word woke, which is why I defend the word woke. It comes from the same British root as vigilant. It just means be vigilant. So be woke. How's that? Yeah.
That's good. Joyce.
So look, you guys, we are lucky to have two members of Congress with us sharing sort of these details and their thought processes. And I think this does speak to this new generation of politics Democrats are trying to create in this country, where we're all engaged, we're using modern technological tools, and we can do better and rebuild democracy. But what we have to do is stay enthusiastic, and we have to keep having conversations with our friends and our neighbors and our family, telling them how important it is and bringing them into the fold. But I really do want to thank the two of y'all. There's nothing like interaction with a member of Congress. My options are very slim in Alabama. Only Terry Sewell speaks with my voice. And it is really reassuring to see that you guys care.
We are going to pick up a new seat, are we not?
Yep, one more in Alabama.
We did. We're gonna, I think, have Shamari figures, so we're excited about that.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. You are both just so amazing, and it's such an honor to be in this dialogue with all of you. And thank you to everyone who joined this conversation. Please continue to talk about Project 2025. I truly think it is one of our strongest closing arguments as we head toward victory in November. And please continue to stay organized and volunteer and do everything that you do so well at the grassroots level. I'm going to hand it back to you now, Susan, with a lot of gratitude. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks for your great leadership, Jared.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. He is my congressman, and I am very much for that. And I see Representative Raskin is starting to take his tie off and everything, so he's done for the day. But you know what? It was an honor to have all of you tonight to help us understand Project 2025, but we have to take action to stop it. So first of all, citizens can play a role in supporting this crucial work to stop it. And so there's a forum in chat right now, a Google form, that we'd like you to fill out and commit to participate in our efforts to stop Project 2025, and you'll be kept apprised of specific ways you can help. But second, as a grassroots leader, I think it's even more important, as Representative Raskin said, Project 2024. We have 96 days to roll up our sleeves, work as hard as we can, leave nothing on the field. We have people to talk to, doors to knock, calls to make. So again, website in chat right now for our grassroots groups where you can take action in our phone banks, our canvassing, our voter registration, our training, and it may be our last election if we don't. So just a little thing to leave you with on a bright note. We have so many people showing up to our phone banks and our canvasses. Thousands of people are volunteering. The campaign itself, the Harris campaign, has signed up 360,000 volunteers since she started. So that's insane. And we have almost 1,000 people coming to our phone bank in a few minutes. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And we really appreciate our special guest. Let's give him a round of applause.
Buddy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. And we hope we see you at all our events, and also that you fill out that Google form right now. Thank you very much.